Parents at more than 300 schools in Surrey have signed a pact to keep their children's lives free from smartphones until they're at least 14. There have been more than 3,500 of them in the county so far. That's the second highest figure in the country, according to data from the campaign group Smartphone Free Childhood. Sue Atkins is a parenting expert from Wallingham and a former deputy head teacher who campaigns to help children build healthy relationships with technology.
One very simple thing is to change your language. Instead of parental controls, which immediately make teenagers go, oh, got to get round that, having conversations together where you're not just coming down nagging. You're actually saying, look, we've got a problem. You know yourself that you're scrolling too much, you're on it too long.
Have a listen to this, because parents at more than 300 schools in Surrey have signed a pact to keep their children's lives free from smartphones until they're at least 14 years old. There have been more than 3,500 pacts in the county so far. That's the second highest figure in the country, according to data from the campaign group Smartphone Free Childhood. The group started only in February this year and now has 150,000 members. Our man Adrian Harms has been to St Lawrence C of E Junior School in East Molesey, where more than 100 pacts have been signed. He spoke first to head teacher Grace McLean and then to parent Sophie Craig.
Currently, the policy at St Lawrence Junior School is that once the children turn 10, if they request permission to walk home independently on their own, they are allowed to bring in a phone. And mostly the majority of children bring in a smartphone. The phone is handed in to the teacher at the beginning of the day, it's locked away, and at the end of the day handed back to the pupil, who can then use it to walk home.
Right. And what is proposed from now on? Is that going to stay, or is that going to change?
Well, this is what we're looking at. So we are looking at what the response is from the parents, and we're looking at what the community are feeling about the use of smartphones. Obviously, it's a governor decision, so it'll be something that I'll be sitting down around the table with the governors as the head teacher and looking at that policy and thinking about whether actually we want to move more towards the idea of using a simple phone rather than a smartphone for the children from September 25.
How distracting do you think phones are?
I think phones can be very distracting. I mean, we're lucky in that at the moment the children hand them in and don't see them for the whole day, as is common in many, many primary schools. But what we do find, and what many head teachers find, is the minute the children do get that phone back, the first thing they do is turn them on, and they're almost like a magnet then. So for the children that haven't got that smartphone, they then swarm towards the phone. So they are distracting.
Let's get a parent's view. You say you've got a child here and a child...
I have a child who's 9 and a child who's 11.
Right.
So I'm sort of right in the depth of kind of making a decision around whether the children of mine should be given a smartphone.
At the moment, what do you do? Have any of them got smartphones?
So no, my children don't have a smartphone. My 11-year-old went to high school, secondary school in September with effectively a phone that only allows him to call and text. Because of this movement, I think parents have been put in a really impossible situation, and sort of 90% of kids aged 11 or younger have been given one. So it kind of is the norm. So how do you go against something as impactful as that when you've then, with a movement like this, it's just given us availability of the dangers of a smartphone. So I've gone against it, and actually I'm finding that more and more parents are opting for kind of what's deemed a brick phone, which doesn't have the damaging kind of content on it that's not designed for children.
Right. How difficult do your children find it because they don't have a smartphone?
I mean, we get pushback, of course, but we're trying to educate him on the reasons why. And it's just become norm in our house that that's what he has. We're trying to encourage him to have a childhood versus a kind of situation where he's taken over by a digital device.
It's fascinating, this, isn't it? So what age do you think a child should be given a smartphone? Let's take you now to Adrian Harms. Where do we find you, Harms? You've got a parent beside you.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning to you, James.
Me, who I'll introduce in a minute. But this is terrific. This is a scene that's probably being played out in hundreds of homes across Surrey at this particular time of day. I mean, the kitchen of the house of John Townsend and his family. His two children, Stella, who's in year 5, and Felix, year 3, are standing by me as well. They've got their lovely green jumpers on before they go off to school at St Peter's C of E Primary School in Recklesham. I think Felix, who is in year 3, is just drawing a picture of me, actually. The family dog, Rafi, is here as well. I've been made a nice cup of coffee. So it's all go here. It's a typical household just before the children go off to school. But we're here to talk about phones, as you say. Let's have a word to John, who's dad. Good morning to you, John. Can I first of all say your children are incredibly well behaved. It seems very organised for this time in the morning.
Oh, you've caught us at a good moment, but it's very kind of you to say so.
Let's talk about phones. What's your view on mobile phones and what age? Because you're getting to this danger age now, year 5 and slightly less year 3.
Yeah, I think traditionally it's been a decision when you get to year 6 and moving into secondary school, and a lot of parents have felt they've needed to give their children a smartphone because of peer pressure, and they don't want their children to miss out on those group friendships that happen. But we're also really aware that these are not phones, they're mini computers in pockets which have access to all this information, the whole world, and the dangers of that. And we've seen so much robust evidence now that particularly social media, but also the access to phones can be quite damaging. So I'm keen to, my wife and I as well, we're keen to delay this as long as possible. And I think the way to do that is power in numbers. So if we can get enough parents together to commit to delaying a phone, that takes away that danger of peer pressure being a factor.
Is there any thought in terms of, particularly your daughter, Stella, who's in year 5, any sort of device for safety, for example, if she's getting the bus perhaps in a couple of years' time, so at least you know where she is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a brick phone is absolutely fine, where you don't have access to the internet. What we always thought of as a phone, the ability to make calls and texts, and so you know where they are. But I think that's very different to having bips. And I mean, I know how addictive phones are myself. I read a great book called Stolen Focus recently, and Jonathan Haidt talks a lot about the anxious generation. And you're constantly a bit like Gollum or Frodo and Lord.
Oh, it looks like we've just lost the signal there from Harmsey, which is a bit of a shame. Do have some other people to talk to listening to that. Jennifer Powers is a parent from Richmond and a member of this group, Smartphone Free Childhood. And Jennifer, morning to you. Hello.
Good morning.
How do you feel about Surrey having the second highest number in the country of these pacts that parents have signed?
It's hugely impressive, I have to say. Smartphone Free Childhood, we launched the parent packs only a few weeks ago, and already more than 62,000 children have been signed up by their parents across nearly 9,000 schools. That's more than a quarter of all schools in the country. So it's just really grown like wildfire. And as you say, Surrey is a hotspot. It's consistently been the second highest number of packs since the leaderboard went live a few weeks ago. And your family in Recklesham is a case in point, because St. Peter's Primary tops the leaderboard in Surrey for the most parent packs signed when I checked last night, 155 children. But yeah, all across the county, it's been a very quickly growing movement with lots of support.
It's scary what's available for a child, what's on the internet, accessible in their hand. And in many ways, it's parents taking control once again. In many ways, the government and maybe even the smart, the tech companies have stuck their head in the sand about it.
Well, the tech companies, their revenue models are based on eyeballs, and children make up 1/3 of all the eyeballs on the internet. So of course they're going to drag their heels, and they're going to do everything possible, including pushing parental controls to not act. But parental controls put the onus on parents, and I don't know about you, I don't know about your listeners, but I find them really difficult to use. I find them intimidating, and we know that most children can get around them. I heard a story the other day about a parent who thought they'd done the right thing. They kept their child off social media, or so they thought, but their child had found a way of downloading an app which can hide an app within it. So, and we also know they can delete apps, which removes the parental controls when they re-download the app, or they can change the time settings. So, it's not good enough for the tech companies to put the onus on parents. As you say, we need more systematic change, and I do think there's a role for the government. And the Online Safety Act is a great first step, but it doesn't go far enough, and it doesn't address the phones in children's pockets. But in the meantime, we have parent power, as you've been hearing this morning.
Right. Tell me what, as say I had a 12-year-old, my youngest is now 18, but
Okay.
And the weird thing is, for me, I just sort of see this as trying to put the genie back in the bottle, really, because
not at all.
Well, one of the things I would say is that my boys were definitely on Facebook before the official age of 13. I know that, and that I think was Facebook letting them down because it was way too easy to just lie about it. It's quite a parent's got to be pretty strong about this, haven't they?
Well, until now, yeah, absolutely. Parents have been put in an impossible situation, but that's changing. I think that's the beauty of the smartphone-free childhood movement and the parent packs, is there really are strength in numbers. And this is a huge cultural moment. We're actually resetting cultural norms. I think very soon it's going to be the default not to give children under 14, at least, access to a smartphone. There's absolutely no reason that they need it. There are new phones coming out as well. I know of a phone coming out in 2025 that will have travel apps and maps and banking app, but no access to social media or internet browsers. So solutions are coming. So if parents can just hold out, and let their children be children just a little bit longer. There's lots of us out there, and you're not alone.
Right, I hear your accent is from America. My sister lives in California, and it's fascinating that a lot of the people who work for the tech companies there, they're ahead of the game on this. They haven't allowed their children.
That's true. Yeah, I've been startled to read that the tech bosses, Steve Jobs didn't allow, his children on tablets. This is extraordinary. They all know how absolutely addictive and dangerous it is, and yet they're willing to push it on our children. And, it's really not the kids' fault when, we turn around and we admonish our kids for, put that down. I told you to put it down. It's really not their fault. I mean, these things are addictive, and we as grown-ups find it hard enough to put them down. So, we can't really blame the children for wanting to have them. I think that's why this movement is so important, is because, we can, working together, we can really change the default. And it's extraordinary how many schools are getting on board as well with the policies, which I think you've been talking about this morning. The primary schools, head teachers really have an amazingly important role to play. If they can ban smartphones on the premises, then that really will send a message to parents not to buy their children a smartphone until at least secondary school. So that's kind of winning half the battle. And then we have the role that secondary schools can play in giving children that 7 hours a day where they have the ability to be, to concentrate, to not be distracted, and so on. So I just feel really positive and optimistic about what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, good talking to you. Do you know what I would be fascinated to hear, though, Jennifer?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Is an 11-year-old trying to barter with their parent and argue back? Because that was the whole thing. Everyone's got one, and I suppose
that's changing. Yeah. That's absolutely changing. And what's really interesting, just as we leave, is if you, when you talk to young people, to 20-somethings, and you ask them, the vast majority wish that smartphones hadn't been invented when they were a teen, because they recognize the huge negative impact it's had on them. So whilst a 12-year-old might argue with you, a 20-year-old will thank you.
Fascinating, isn't it? Anecdotally, I can tell you, my son, when he was doing his A-levels, they both got rid of TikTok off their phones because it was too distracting, which is interesting.
They sound like smart kids.
Well, it's just interesting, isn't it, when that was totally their thoughts. Look, appreciate you coming on this morning, and it's called Smartphone Free Childhood, if you do a search for it. Some messages. Richard, morning to you. He said, when James Caan was asked what age he thought a child should have a smartphone, he said, when you're happy for them to see hard porn. Oh, ouch. And morning, I'm aware, who's this from? You haven't said your name, but morning to you. I'm aware of many cases of children seeing inappropriate content, violence, porn, all before their 12th birthday. This is not okay. Smartphones aren't just phones anymore. They are portable supercomputers, and we know that almost 50% of children find ways to circumnavigate or circumvent parental controls. Let kids be kids. Give them simple brick phones to keep in touch up until the age of 14. If tracking is important to parents, an AirTag works well for this and are much cheaper than a smartphone. So there you have it.